Hello, friends. Father Frank Pavone here, National Director of Priests for Life. Welcome to EndAbortion.tv. Today, once again, we're joined by our associate, Dr. Theresa Burke, who founded Rachel's Vineyard Ministries. Many of you are familiar with that healing ministry throughout the world, bringing moms, dads, and entire families back to the peace and forgiveness of the Lord. Theresa, great to be with you today.
Great to be here. Thanks.
You know, in March of 2020, we will reach the 25th anniversary of Evangelium Vitae, the Gospel of Life.
Wow, has it been that long?
It has been that long. St. John Paul II wrote this document, which has become the Magna Carta of the pro-life movement. For us, in the healing ministries after abortion, paragraph 99 of that document is very, very important. He speaks directly to the women who've had abortions, and he says a number of powerful things to them that I'd like to get your fuller perspective on. He talks to them, first of all, about facing honestly what happened. He talks to them about not giving in to discouragement. He talks about something that, as we know, is a question that frequently arises in their minds. What happened to my baby, and what do I do about that? And so he urges them to entrust their child to the Lord. And then he speaks about the expert and friendly help of others. And then he talks about the fact that they, who have been so devastated by abortion, can become some of the most eloquent spokespersons for the right to life. Tell us your thoughts and insights about what John Paul II said and still says today to those who've had abortions.
You know, as a people that need to remember what's happened, to grieve it, to face it honestly, as he suggests, we're bought into that reality that as we remember our child, we remember the faith that speaks to life everlasting, and that when Christ has died, we remember that. We have to remember that our baby died, that Christ is risen, that our baby is also gone to be with the Lord. And when Christ comes back, he brings the child in his arms to the mother.
He brings the child, yes.
So I think there's just so many levels where faith has such a critical role in bringing healing. And, you know, in psychology, you know, there's so many good interventions I could do as an expert. But I honestly can say I can't do what I've seen God do. And that if we can't offer hope, all there is despair. And you can do a lot of things to help people manage their symptoms, but the Lord heals them. He releases not only the trauma, but brings a healing. And when I think about healing, sometimes we think that, oh, we want to go back to how you felt before this happened. And God's plan is that he makes us better than we ever could have been.
It's not a matter of going back. It's a matter of going forward.
But going forward. So you go back not to be re-traumatized by it, but to be freed from the grip that the trauma has upon your heart and soul and even body. As we talked before about how the trauma is locked and held in the body. So, but the Pope to speak to this, to put it out there as a theology that's truth of the church, encyclical, you know.
Powerful, yes.
It really gives it the weight and the merit that this isn't just something we do and we say to make ourselves feel better. It's the gospel, the gospel of life, and that we're invited to live that life in its fullness. Jesus came that we might have life and have it to the full. That means he came so that we could be released, so that we could be better.
You know, I want to focus for a moment on that, you know, what he says, the courage to face honestly what happened. And you mentioned it there when we say Christ has died, Christ is risen. Now, before we talk about Christ is risen, obviously we have to acknowledge that he died. And it seems to me that there are a lot of people, maybe it's just a common tendency that we have, or even perhaps some of those that are with goodwill trying to help people overcome the pain of their abortion, who jump right away to the point of saying, oh, well, you know, your baby's in heaven. And as you're saying, there is a tremendous comfort and strength that we find when we realize, as I often say to people, God loves your baby more than you do. He wants your baby to be saved even more than you do, even though we want it so much. And so that hope and that assurance in the love of God for these children is very, very important to focus on. But is there a danger if people, after they've gone through the terrible experience of an abortion, jump over the acknowledgement that, hey, my baby died, and immediately simply start talking about the next life?
I think there is, and I've seen it in my practice in the field, because we know that the forgiveness of God and His mercy is always there for us, but people that I've known could have gone to confession 100 times because they never did the grieving. And I think I have this thought of how we can taste and see the goodness of the Lord, but until there's grieving, there's no room to empty that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so that when you take in the Word of God, you can fully digest it.
Yes.
Because you've released a space for it, because that grief, the trauma, takes up a lot of space.
Yes.
And so I like to say the grief needs to be emptied so there's room for the grace. The grace is always there.
Yeah.
But there's something we have to do so that it sticks. And then you don't feel the need to go to confession again and again.
So that's so important because, you know, obviously I've heard many confessions of people with who've had abortions. And, you know, I always tell them, I said, if you still feel bad after this confession, please understand that is normal. It doesn't mean you're not forgiven. It means you need to do the work of grief. Grief is an adjustment to a loss, isn't it? I mean, if you want to define it simply, you have to adjust to a loss. And as I've heard you say often, it's hard. Grief is hard work. You've got to do, you're doing something very deliberately. This is, first of all, very important, not only for the people to know who may be having to go to confession for this, or who have friends and relatives who have to go to confession for this, but for the priest to understand this. Don't just say, okay, everybody, everything's okay, don't think about it anymore. That's one of the worst things he can say.
I think
right?
it is.
He has to say, look, now rejoice that you have been forgiven by the Lord, but undertake now with your hand in His hand and with the help of others, undertake now the work of doing the grief. Now, for someone who, let's say it's been a while from their abortion, they finally got up the courage to go to confession, and maybe that priest is the first person of anybody that they've even talked to about that abortion. What are the kind of things then that the priest should say to her to encourage her to begin that grief work?
Well, it's that if you stop there, you've missed the best part of what's to come, which is through the healing, after the grieving, you actually develop a spiritual relationship with your lost child. And this is a whole nother level. It's like the icing on the cake that awaits you. And if you just stop there, it's like God wants to give you more. Yes, you're forgiven, but He wants to give you more. And there's so much blessing that you can really achieve. And as the Holy Father even said, those who have done this work become the most eloquent defenders of everyone's right to life. Eloquent because they're speaking from their heart. They know what they're talking about.
Right.
It's not a theology.
Right.
It's a lifestyle of passion, of love. And that's the love that when you can be forgiven for something, but when you rearrange the relationship you had with the baby or the trauma, that's what healing is. It's, I see it different. And now I see, as one woman said, there's no greater love. She wrote a memorial square quilt, and she felt she heard her child say, there's no greater love than to give up one's life for one's mom, which means the child's life has brought her to Christ. It's because of the gift of that child. And one of the exercises we do on Rachel's Vineyard is reflect on the meaning of your child's life, which is such a different experience because all the focus is on their death.
Right.
But their life did something. It changed something for the world and for that mother.
Right.
And in the brokenness, in the grieving, you come to find meaning. What was the meaning of that child's life? And then when the meaning comes back as such a blessing, it's like you just feel gratitude that nothing is definitively lost. Not only is the child still alive in the Lord, but that a gift has been given to them in their faith because of who God is, bringing life out of death.
Yes.
And that's a mystery that I don't think we ever we just look at all the destruction, the darkness, culture of death. But in the culture of death, there's no greater field for evangelization than in this issue and all the other issues that are destroying life. Because if we really work through that process, that's the treasure, the pearl of great price that you're going to find. And it's the gift of the grieving, even though it's so painful, but you end up on the other side of it, which means that you're able to transform it into something not only with great meaning, but great value. It would never replace the joy and love that any mother or father would want to have life with their child, but God gives us something else, and he also gives us the gift of his son.
So there's that ongoing relationship with the child.
And the fullness of life in his son.
In his son.
Yeah.
We'll delve more into this. So if you're just joining us, we're talking with Dr. Theresa Burke, founder of Rachel's Vineyard, part of our Priests for Life team. And I'm Father Frank Pavone of Priests for Life. Theresa, some of the other elements of the grief work that still has to be done after a mother will confess an abortion, and not just the mother, obviously the father may be making the confession, because, and we can get into that more, a man can commit the sin of abortion, can't have the procedure of abortion in his body, but he can commit the sin in his soul by consenting to it, and sometimes being the one who actually pressures it or forces it. So he too is going to grieve, is going to have to do this work of grieving. But let's look at some of the other elements, because again, she makes her confession and it's a mistake for either her or the priest to think, okay, everything's done. No, it's just the beginning. For example, I'm thinking of the anger issues. You know, as she comes to realize more and more, you know what I just did? I ended the life of my own child. Aren't there going to be a lot of anger issues she's going to have to work out? What are the conflicts there now that have developed in her relationship with the baby's father, maybe in her relationship with her own parents, who may have either pushed her to have the abortion or may just have given the impression that they would be distant, and so maybe she didn't even tell them. And so there's going to be a fear and apprehension of them coming to know about this. Anger toward the abortionist or the clinic staff, or who knows how they treated her. There's a lot of work there, isn't there, to sort of readjust those relationships and all those inner conflicts.
Well, there's a lot of relationships that need to be reconciled somehow. And there's also something where you look at the abortion in the larger context of your life and all the people that played a role, even to the point of coercion. So to be able to go back and look at that, there's another level of healing by embracing it and saying, I was afraid to speak up. I didn't, at one point, everything inside me was screaming, get off the table and get out of here, but they couldn't move. And I just think that when you look at everybody who played a role, we don't dismiss our personal responsibility in any, challenging situation or a mistake that was made, but I think that a lot of women take all the burden of the guilt, the blame, the shame, the responsibility. The woman caught in adultery, it's all her fault. Who are the other people that were there that brought all this forth? And that's where the anger really comes back, because when they go back and they start to feel, start to really look at the situation, they remember everybody who might have threatened them, I'm not going to love you if you don't do this, this is what's best, and just to look at that. And that's where pain comes forward. That's already there, but it hasn't been sort of looked at in a way that allows you to not only grapple with it, but move beyond it, because you can stay stuck in anger towards people and even unconsciously not even aware of why you can't stand to look at them, or you don't want to be around them, or I can't go home for Christmas anymore. And
can't go home, can't go to certain places, maybe can't have physical intimacy anymore,
all
right?
the
That's
sexual
another
problems that result, sexual dysfunction, because this is the place you're celebrating union and communion with God even. And when a life, when death has come out of that experience of profound intimacy and what is supposed to be love, that death event is actually attached, it becomes a trauma attached to one's sex life. And so, like we talked about before, the different responses of trauma, some people just go numb, they don't feel anything. Or they say, I just want to get this over with, and they're like a dead body that's not even there. And their partner may be experiencing pleasure and everything, and she's dissociated.
You know what, and this all ties in with this. What I'm always impressed by as we either do Rachel's Vineyard work or we talk with the men and women who have come through the Silent No More campaign, how many of them say, we had that experience that day of the procedure, and then we never spoke about it again. This is such a, you must hear it all the time
Yeah,
too, right?
I do.
It's so, we never spoke about it again. Now that's part of, obviously, the traumatic symptom of avoidance, right?
Right.
Let's just get rid of it. Part of it, unfortunately, might also be fostered by this mistaken idea. I mean, maybe they did at some point talk to a fellow believer or a pastor, and they said, hey, you know what? God has forgiven you. Move on. Don't push it away. Don't think about it anymore. Not a good idea.
Well, it festers.
Yeah, it festers.
It festers. And I think that's when couples, they'll say that our marriage died the day that child died. The pleasure we had in our sex life was never returned. In fact, there's some people, even men, who can't consummate their marriage when they have had an abortion before they were married, but they had no problem before that death event.
Yes.
So they just bring the baggage in, and
they bring it in.
It festers. I think that it's not unfair to even call it a type of cancer that insidiously destroys cell by cell, like the living temple of our bodies.
And here's a big irony: the pro-abortion people, as you know, they'll say, oh, well, you've got to be able to have an abortion so you can get on with your career, so that you can get on with your education. Isn't it true to say that because of this festering wound of abortion, that's precisely, for many people, what then interferes with their ability to get on with their career?
Yes, it goes both ways. If you're someone that's going to distract yourself, you can go on and be very, very busy. You could be a workaholic. You could earn many degrees. But we can only do that for so long before the trauma catches up.
It catches up.
Burns you out.
That's right.
Because you haven't stepped back to deal with these things. And this is probably a really interesting aspect of healing, when somebody functions and overachieves and they go, and then they're like maybe 60 or 70 years old, and they'll say, I can't run anymore. They use that word, I have to stop running, it's killing me. And I hear this a lot in hospice work, when people have cancer and they're dying and they were fine their whole life, but they're getting ready to meet the Lord, and then they want to then they need to reconcile it. So when we hear this, how many women are bothered after abortion, how many men are bothered, and you can do a whole lot of research that's very compelling, but someone at the very end of life could say, I can't think of anything else but this, and I'm afraid to die until I deal with it. So we just don't know at what stage of life, whether it's right away, whether it's when you're having, when you're trying to get pregnant, when you hold your firstborn and you remember the one that was lost years before.
Right.
And the trauma comes back so powerfully, so potently, that people are overwhelmed by it, disabled by it sometimes, and they have a lot of trouble connecting what happened till they get into the healing.
What damage can happen with, for someone who's had an abortion, what damage can happen to their relationship with subsequent children that they have?
Yeah, this is a great question, and I think that there's sometimes an ambivalence. Many people will delay childbearing because it's almost like the reasons you didn't have the abortion have to become like stuck in stone. And so a lot of people will go on, and without the healing, they actually feel that they would be a terrible mother because they had to believe that it's better to abort this child as a 16-year-old than have me as its mom for whatever reason. And then if that isn't healed, that goes. But if someone moves on to have children, like you had just talked about, there's very well-known and well-researched bonding issues. Sometimes the baby itself is a trigger to the past loss.
Right.
So in the avoidant response, moms want to step back from the baby. They'd rather put the baby in daycare immediately and go off and get a degree, you know, or I'm going to go back to work because there's something triggered. We have many, many stories of this. I've witnessed them on every retreat, this ambivalence, you know, like wanting motherhood and being afraid of it, feeling that at the core they're a bad mom. I had patients who couldn't breastfeed their babies. They felt they would poison their child. This is serious.
Yeah.
A lot of postpartum depressions can ensue.
Right.
And the first time they see the ultrasound, which is normally such a great, fun, exciting thing, and the whole family's going to get called to hear what the sex is, it's traumatic because they see a very small baby that might even be less along than the one
Than when they had the abortion.
yeah, and it's really traumatic. So, and now we have these incredible ultrasounds that show way more detail than the old days. So, it's traumatic. And, you know, as a woman, this should be like the most incredible, miraculous time of your life. And the fact that when these wounds are unhealed, I think once again, something so powerful is stolen from the family, and just the ability to enjoy those precious moments that are so natural. And it becomes unnatural because the trauma is so devastating that when you even get a little peek into remembering, it brings back those trauma responses, and they can be unmanageable sometimes.
I've seen also you have in some cases this response of overprotectiveness. Is it a sense of guilt being expressed there?
You see, we have to be careful when we talk about the symptoms because somebody might have this one and another this one.
That's right.
Then there's other mothers that not only are they going to have their baby, they might have 10 more.
Right.
And they will be homeschooling mothers who don't leave their child's side, who feel like they're wonderful mothers, but they overprotect, they overcompensate, they feel very threatened by the outside, like their child's not safe. That's a trauma theme from the baby that was injured and taken.
Yes.
And so you can kind of have like a lot of anxiety around other people being there to help, or I can't leave my child with a babysitter, someone's going to hurt them. This is a hypervigilance. It's where you're on the alert for threats of danger and everything feels like a threat. And, you know, it's true that there are a lot of threats in the culture and in life, so I don't, I acknowledge that, but I'm talking like on a psychological level, even on a spiritual level, the ability to trust can be shattered in even these levels, like where my baby's not safe with my mother, especially if the grandmom is the one who wanted to have an abortion.
Wow. Well, we're talking with Dr. Theresa Burke. There's a lot more to explore here, friends. Let's take a little break, and we will be right back.